Dream11.
Download the MPL app from mpl.live.
Make your team only on My 11 Circle.
Looking at these ads, you may wonder why so many people are going crazy about these fantasy leagues, and more importantly, why are these companies pushing their products so aggressively? The Indian fantasy sports market has shown phenomenal growth. The gross revenue of online fantasy sports operators stood at 2,400 crore rupees in financial year 20 as compared to just 920 crore rupees in financial year 19, and that is almost a 3 times year-on-year growth. The Indian Premier League continues to be the most popular league, with platforms such as Dream11, Mobile Premier League and even My Team 11 trying to leverage its popularity. And the fantasy league industry has seen a CAGR, or a compounded annual growth rate, of 32% and is expected to be worth close to $3.7 billion by the end of 2024. Now that is a big number, isn't it? To give you some perspective, Dream11's user base has grown from just 1.3 million in 2015 to more than 50 million users in 2019. Well, how and why is this happening? Now this is primarily because of two reasons. One being that the rise of online fantasy sports gaming in India has not only increased the interest of users in sports, but has also spawned a whole ecosystem around it. Most importantly, the emergence of fantasy sports is driving a deeper connection between sports fans and real-life sports, and these fantasy sports games have converted many casual sports viewers into dedicated fans. For example, studies in the United States show that when a sports user evolves into a fantasy sports user, he or she consumes 80% more sports. So by increasing the connection between the live sporting action and a fantasy game, fantasy sports is helping increase user engagement, which in turn facilitates increased sports consumption. An important aspect in bridging the gap between real sports and fantasy sports has been technology. The industry has seen a growth in terms of number of technology providers that provide analytical services to the user and the operator. Dream11 has partnered with CleverTap, whose cohort analysis feature allows Dream11 to get a deeper understanding of how its users engage with the app. And 2. The rapid growth of fantasy sports in India has been well supported by continued investor interest by some of the leading players in the market. For example, in the month of September 2020, Dream11 had managed to raise $225 million, which was primarily a cash infusion. And that is not it. Companies like Fantane Sports, Hala Play, FanFight have been raising enormous amount of capital through fundings from companies like BookMyShow and the Nazara Technologies. The businesses and revenue models of these fantasy sport league companies are based on what Spotify follows. Yes, you guessed it right, a freemium model. The freemium business model allows users to utilize the basic features of a software or a service, then charges for upgrades to the basic package. It is a popular tactic for companies just starting out, as they try to attract users to the software or service. Now the fantasy league companies aren't exactly like Spotify, where we can listen to some free music with some ads in the middle. They are focused on two things. The first, to be free for users to play free contests which may or may not have cash prizes associated with them. And the second, to pay and play, where users pay an entry fee to participate in the paid contests. The operator charges a service or a platform fee of 15 to 25% from the total pool before they distribute the winnings. And as we all know, Dream11 is the market leader of fantasy sports in India with a valuation of $2.25 billion, and it has more than 80% of the market share, followed by My Team 11 with a user base of 8 to 10 million and an annual revenue of $22 million. The IPL 2020 has certainly brought in some changes in the industry. Literally every second advertisement that we see during the matches is either MS Dhoni getting out after hitting Khadu's ka scooter or Shikhar forgetting the basics of gully cricket. It is quite amusing to see that these organizations are coming up with such innovative ways of selling their product, and believe it or not, they managed to change the underlying impression of fantasy leagues of being nothing more than a gambling platform. The legitimacy of these platforms and the resultant demarcation between games of chance and skill had often come into question before, but due to these innovative marketing strategies, they have managed to establish themselves as a game of skill as compared to illegal activities such as sports betting. Now this begs the question, how are these companies able to bring so many users to their platform? There are 4 ways in which they are able to do that: fun and excitement, the ability to manage teams virtually, the utilization of sports knowledge, and most importantly, the opportunity to win money. With the help of these 4 factors, they market their product heavily to the low and middle income groups. To give you some more perspective, According to a KPMG report, more than 70% of the respondents who fell in the bracket of an annual income of less than 3 lakhs have said that they have paid for fantasy games at least once in the last 12 to 15 months. Of these, around 38% of the respondents spent more than Rs 500 per month on fantasy platforms. And the reason is quite obvious. They view fantasy sports platforms as a mean to supplement their income in a regulated environment as opposed to using unregulated mediums such as sports betting. This brings us to the final section of our video. Can these fantasy leagues act as an alternative to the stock market? Looking for a great player with a great coach is a lot like looking for a great company with a great CEO. And it is pretty obvious that the most common thing between fantasy sports and the stock market is their unpredictability. The time and money spent on these fantasy leagues is spent with the same expectations as investors who invest their time and money in the stock markets to gain many-fold returns. To manage a stock portfolio, there are strategies that are used, and the same can be replicated in these leagues. It includes depth and diversification in growth and value of a stock, which depends on the investment goals and risk appetite of both the investor or the fantasy league player. Just like in the stock markets, where the best performing stocks with a track record of positive growth are selected, players with a solid track record of their performance are chosen, both chosen with an expectation of receiving multi-bagger returns. But even if you're a perennial playoff qualifier in your fantasy league and you've got a solid accounting background, your skills won't necessarily help you make money in the markets. That's because research suggests that investing is more unpredictable than fantasy sports. In a study measuring the role of luck versus skill, a team at the MIT Sports Lab in the US found that fantasy sports rewards a player's ability more reliably than the stock markets. In a game driven by skill, win-loss records should vary based on who's playing. Players with poor skills will rarely get you any points, while players with strong skills can consistently win. And that's not it. Competition in the stock markets is also more fierce. With fantasy leagues, who you're playing with does make a difference in your chances of success. If your league mates are hardcore football junkies who spend hours a day on research, the opportunities to find an edge over them would be slim. But if you're playing in a 12-person league, there's not millions of people deciding when a player should be drafted or who should be picked up on waivers. And that's exactly what you will be up against in the stock markets. Millions of investors, including professional portfolio managers, giving their viewpoints and comments on companies and the industry. And time and again, we have seen that the markets have a knack for humbling people. So what do you think gives better returns, the markets or the fantasy league? Let us know in the comments below. And in the meanwhile, we hope that your fantasy team is ready for tonight's game.